Being an entrepreneur is terrifying to most people because it can be a huge risk and you have to work like 50 times harder than when you're just an employee. And I don't mean just an employee, but you know what I'm talking about. Today, I'm speaking with Jeremy Schneider, who took the risk and it paid off because he retired at age 36. Whether you're an entrepreneur or not, I can't wait for you to hear the 5 strategies that Jeremy used that you can start implementing today. Jeremy, thank you so much for being here with me.
Thank you so much for having me, Mindy. I'm so pumped.
Woohoo! So Jeremy, I know that you're an entrepreneur. Are you an entrepreneur or are you a former entrepreneur now?
I definitely think I'm both because I'm starting another company as we speak. But that word sometimes means like unemployed. And so I sometimes just tell people I'm unemployed and then I can surprise them if I'm doing a little bit better.
Awkward conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so you're an entrepreneur, and that makes your financial journey look a little different than other people's. When you were building your business from the outset, was FI your goal? And did you feel like this company was going to be your best vehicle for reaching FI?
FI was definitely my goal. I don't think I knew that term back then. You know, my college years were during the dot-com boom and then bust. I graduated in 2002. And so I saw young people starting tech companies and becoming multimillionaires seemingly very easily back in the late 90s. I was like, oh yeah, let's do that. But the term financial independence or FIRE, that wasn't like on my radar yet. And so that was definitely kind of what I was going for. But I also don't think it was my best path. You know, I turned down a job offer from Microsoft coming out of college. And I think that would have been my best path, just like go get a high-paying job, live frugally, save aggressively. And I think even back then I knew that was an option, but I just didn't want to do that. And that's really the main driving factor that got me into entrepreneurship is I just didn't want to work for a gigantic company, being a cog in the machine my whole life.
Well, and I think that's valid. I think that that is something that most entrepreneurs have in common with you. They want to be the boss of the world. They want to be the boss of their own little world, and they don't want to have to answer to somebody else. When you were working and as FI became more of a thing, did you have a FI number in mind? And I'm thinking, of course, of the 4% rule and you know, that sort of thing.
When I'm listening to episodes of your show, I feel like a lot of people have, at least that I heard, had kind of a similar story where they like found Mr. Money Mustache and like the math clicked. My story is really different where I was just kind of in tech startup world. You know, I bootstrapped my company, grew it for 12 years. I sold it for just over $5 million. My share after taxes was about $2 million. And then I didn't know there's such thing as a FI number. I was just working at this new company that acquired us. And then 2 years later, I was realizing, wow, my investments are growing faster than my income is coming in. Why do I even need my income anymore? And I quit. And I was like, as long as I spend less than my investments grow, then I can quit. And I think I did that all without knowing about the FI movement or knowing about the 4% rule.
What? You didn't even know about this and you did this?
I think that's true. I hope I'm not like misrepresenting history, but I think my math was literally like, look, my investments made $300,000 this year. My income was $150. I'm spending like 50.
That sounds like it's working.
It all adds up, right? You know, even if there's some volatility built in there, which I understood there was, of course, it seems like it's in the ballpark.
So you were spending 50 while, were you living in Silicon Valley?
I had a tech company, but I lived in San Diego. But yeah, I was living.
Well, still, California. I mean, San Diego is not a cheap place to live. Let me tell you all about that. So was it difficult to keep your spending in check? Or are you just a naturally frugal person and this is just how it goes?
You know, my childhood was marked by a very frugal father who, you know, kind of like ruled with an iron fist about what we were allowed to spend money on. And then in college, I was like working, I had a track scholarship and I was working summers and sometimes during the school year. And then during all my 20s, I was living on next to nothing, sometimes living on credit cards while I was bootstrapping this company with no income. And so basically my whole like childhood adult life, I was living on just as little money as I could spend. And then with one click of the refresh button on my bank account, I went from, you know, $100,000 net worth to $2 million net worth. But like those habits died very hard. You know, it wasn't like I was going to clubs and getting bottle service or, buying fancy watches. Like none of that ever was just part of my fiber, and it still isn't. So, I loosened up. I went from spending like maybe $30,000 a year, I was driving a 99 Ford Explorer that I paid $3,000 cash for. I was living in a garage. I was converted to an apartment that was like owned by my friends. I was paying $1,350 for rent. So like my monthly expenses were about $3,000. Like for sure loosened up. I went from like $3,000 to $5,000 a month or whatever it is, which felt extraordinarily extravagant. Spending an extra $2,000 a month was like wild to me. Still kind of is, but it was never, it was never in the realm of blowing through my big chunk of money.
This fire devotee doubled his spending as soon as he hit FI.
Exactly. I did.
That's a good clickbait title. And it's actually true, but we're probably not going to use it. But that's great that you were able to kind of let go a little bit of the purse strings. I could use some lessons in that. So please, we'll talk after this about some specifics that you were able to let go. Was it just seeing how much was in your bank account that allowed you to like spend a little bit more? And what are you spending on? I mean, $5,000 in San Diego is not that much, frankly.
It didn't happen overnight. I think for years after the acquisition, it was still like kind of wearing off, like this idea that I could spend more money. Cause I clicked refresh my bank account. I saw a bigger number. I was like, obviously that's a ton of money, but I don't know. Am I going to spend it all? I didn't really know. And still, I think it was literally in the last 12 months, this is like still a current thing. I was flossing and I had this little tiny piece of floss and it was like slipping out of my fingers. And it was like very frustrating and angry. And I hate flossing so much because of this. And I asked myself this question, why am I using such a small piece of floss? And the answer was to save money. And that wasn't like a logical answer because obviously I have enough money to like wrap floss around my arms and my neck and whatever, it wouldn't even make a difference. But like that was a habit that I was like, oh, I don't want to buy more floss. I'm just going to use this little tiny 8-inch piece or whatever. It's such a stupid story. But like that was a habit that just in the last 12-month period, I was like, okay, wait a minute. So I went to Amazon. I was like, I'm buying a 3-pack of the nicest floss they have. And so, when you said you need some tips, like I'm still learning that too, because it is weird when you spend your whole life, having money be this like primary factor by which you make decisions to like loosen up. And so, the first thing that is I stopped worrying so much about like grocery prices. I used to always like pace the aisles, national brand versus generic brand, like, compare dollars per ounce and every single thing. Now I'm just like, I hate grocery shopping. I'm just going to buy whatever I want, food that I like. And as long as it's still going to be cheaper than going out to a restaurant. So like whatever my grocery bill is, it is. And that's definitely like a quality of life improvement. That
is like so, what is the word I'm looking for? That's such a good example of people like us in the FIRE community who have reached financial independence, but you grew up so frugal, it's hard to let that go. Okay, so do you still consider yourself to be frugal?
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. I feel like it's a little bit not fair to my former self to say that I'm frugal because I am like a wild spender compared to, like you said, I doubled my spending after I hit FI. But I still, I still see friends of mine who are dramatically less wealthy who buy things I would never buy, like upgrading flights or leasing cars or renting fancy apartments or, whatever it is. And I'm like, that is a massive waste. I would never do that. And so I still, and I think part of frugality isn't necessarily like the 8-inch floss. I think part of frugality is getting good value for your money, right? And so I buy nice things, but I try to buy fewer things. I don't try to waste money. And so I still think I'm frugal to the core, but I'm just kind of like upgraded a little bit.
So what was your yearly income at the beginning of your FI journey or your entrepreneurial journey? And did it evolve at all?
Early on, when I started the company, my income was near zero. My first year in business, we made $14,000. My take home was like, maybe $10,000. And this was in the early 2000s. It still wasn't enough to even survive on the most frugal standards. And so for a couple of years, I was living on credit cards. I mean, just today, I was reminiscing about how for 2 years, my living expenses were coming off of a credit card. And I racked up $12,000 in credit card debt just to buy the most frugal of groceries. As the business started to do better, I paid off that credit card debt down to zero. And then I basically set on a $36,000 annual salary, which was the lowest of my company. We ended up having 7 employees, so everyone made more than I did. And in 2015, when I sold the company, I was making $36,000 a year, just at $3,000 a month, just the minimum I could pay myself to get by. And then, the company sold. They wired $2 million in my bank account, and then they started paying me $155,000 a year, which was like my new tech director salary at this tech company or whatever. And so it was definitely a shakeup. But even out of $36,000 a year, I was living below my means. I was spending about $30,000 a year, and I was saving about $5,000 a year. And so my net worth, not counting the company the day before the wire went through, was about $100,000 because I had put about $50,000 into a Roth IRA, bunch of index funds or maybe even mutual funds back then, and that had doubled or so in the 12 years that I had been doing it. And so even on the minimal salary, I was on my way to becoming a millionaire by traditional retirement age, living on $36,000 in San Diego.
That is very impressive. And anybody who does not get totally excited about that statement, they're probably not watching this anyway. I am so excited about that because 36,000 in San Diego, I'm super impressed that you were able to live off of less than 36,000. I mean, I can hear a lot of people saying, "Oh, it's not possible. It's not possible." Excuse me. Here is an example right here of Jeremy saying, "Yes, it is in fact possible." That first year making $14,000 a year, that gives me the heebie-jeebies so hard.
That was my company's top line revenue. We had expenses, and then my take home was whatever, 8 or 10,000 or something.
That's even worse.
Yeah, no, it was. I mean, but you kind of led off this episode by saying entrepreneurship is scary, right? Because Microsoft was about to give me this bonus and welcome package and relocation and yada, 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 paycheck. And so I just, you step off the cliff into nothingness and hope that you can catch yourself eventually. And so it is scary at the beginning.
It really can be. Did you ever feel like throwing in the towel? Ugh, I got to stop this. I'm only making $10,000 a year.
Constantly, I think any entrepreneur who doesn't have these dramatic emotional swings is probably, not telling the truth. But it definitely was one day I'd talk to a potential client who seemed interested. I was like, oh my gosh, you start multiplying numbers in your head. Okay, if I get 1 per week for the next month, I'm gonna be a millionaire. And then a month goes by and there's 0 sales, 0 phone calls. And I'm like, what am I doing? I'm going to be destitute. And my backup plan was always go crawling back to corporate America and try to get a job and pay off my debt the old-fashioned way. And I just think the stubbornness in me, is what caused me to not be willing to do that, right? There definitely wasn't, the first 2 or 3 years, right? This isn't 2 or 3 months, 2 or 3 years. That's a long time when you're 22 to 25. It was not going well, but I think part of entrepreneurship is just persistence and being unwilling to give up even in the face of, odds that seem very much against you.
You brought up investing. Even though you were not making a ton of money, you were still investing, which I love. That is a great takeaway for anybody watching this. No matter what you're making, you can be investing something. And if you only have a little bit, put it in your Roth so it's growing tax-free. What were you investing in both before you sold your company and then after you sold your company?
Yeah, so the first ages 22 to 25 or so, I wasn't investing. I was living on credit cards. But then around 25, the Tais turn is able to start paying myself that $3,000 a month, living on $2,500 a month or whatever. And then that $500 a month extra, I was putting into a Roth IRA, just like you said. I had very low income, and so I was able to put that in almost tax-free. It's grown tax-free. And then I forget, I think I was investing in just some random Fidelity mutual funds, like the Fidelity Fund and the Fidelity Contra Fund. I didn't really know what index funds were. I didn't really, I kind of learned investing from my dad, who was great to teach it to me. And when I was a teenager, and he said, you go to Morningstar and you look at, you filter for funds that look good, that have good returns and yada, yada, yada. And so I kind of just was randomly picking these funds without really knowing what I was doing. And honestly, it was not terrible. It's not a terrible strategy. They owned a bunch of stocks. They went up in value. And namely Fidelity Contra Fund has been one of the best performing mutual funds, over the last 30 to 40 years. But then when I shook hands to sell the company and I knew I was going to have this windfall coming my way, I started reading every book I could get my hands on and investing. And then like the light bulb clicked. I was like, oh, okay. The stock market's efficient. Trying to pick and choose stocks or pick and choose funds or pick and choose segments of the market or whatever is really just opening yourself up to underperformance. And I have no better chance than random to get lucky and pick. And so what I should really be doing is minimizing my fees, maximizing my diversity. And so now I basically invest in, my favorite thing is a target date index fund, which is like a single target date fund offered by Vanguard, Fidelity, or Schwab that is a very low fee, around 0.1% or lower, has U.S. international bonds, or basically the ETF equivalent of that exact same thing, like a U.S. ETF, an international ETF, and a bond ETF. That's it. Like dramatically simple. And like the day I got my $2 million wire, maybe the next day when the banks were open or whatever, I went and bought, 5 different ETFs, which was too complicated. I wish I would have bought 3, but I bought 5 different ETFs, threw $2 million in the market on that day. And to that's where it sits. And that's what basically has brought my net worth from 2 million to 5 million since then.
Okay, we got to celebrate the huge net worth increase. Woohoo! But also I want to say, yes, Jeremy, the personal finance hero over here. Index fund hero. I want to circle back to the beginning of that little conversation where you said you didn't know about index funds. This is Jeremy Schneider from Personal Finance Club. He didn't know about index funds in the beginning. That doesn't make him a bad person. He then discovered them and changed his investment strategy. So if you are investing and like beating yourself up because you didn't know about index funds, let me give you another little hint. Mindy Jensen from BiggerPockets Money did not know anything about index funds until maybe like 5 minutes before J.L. Collins wrote his stock series. You don't have to know everything, and you shouldn't feel bad because you don't know everything. You also don't have to be investing in everything. All right. Do you consider yourself to be retired now?
You use a term on one of your recent episodes, retirement police, and that really struck a chord with me because the retirement police are always coming after me. They're like, hey, how come, if you're retired, how come you're doing this? How come you have an Instagram? You're doing education? How come you're starting a new business? And I'm like, what am I allowed to do? Do I need to be just drinking Mai Tais on the beach and being a drain on society to be retired? And so, I don't know if I'm retired, I'm at an office right now. I have a camera you can kind of see. There's like an office door and I've made it into like a little studio over here. There's one blue wall behind me so I can like go get on the Zoom. But I'm in an office. I like kind of live normal life, but I do it because it's what I want to do. I like doing this. I'm really passionate about personal finance and education. I like working with my team and starting a company. I think that's really fun. I don't need the money to survive. And so I'd say mathematically, yes, I'm retired, but by my, typical day, it doesn't look like I'm retired. But I think retirement's somewhat more of a mindset because I don't, I've got the FU money. I don't need to answer to a boss and I can do whatever I want, which is exactly what I'm doing. So yeah, I'm retired. Take that, retirement police.
What do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions of financial independence?
I've heard you ask this question before, so I did think about it ahead of time. And the one that I want to go with is, I think a lot of people think that early retirement is a finish line. And I apologize in advance because I ran track in college, and so I use a lot of track and field metaphors. But when I was building my company, I was hoping for an exit, frankly. I wanted to sell the company and make my millions and, lean at the tape and put my hands in the air and declare victory and say I did it. And I think that a lot of people just the way we even talk about FIRE, like what's your number, what's your date, how many days left, how many months left, like it's all about this like day that happens, this number that happens, and then you've hit the finish line, you declare victory, and then you like sail off into the sunset, right? But here's the thing about sailing off into the sunset, like that term is kind of like from the perspective of the viewer. Like if you're on a boat sailing in the sunset, it's really boring, you're just sitting there on a boat, right? You're just like not any people. And so like when I sold my company and made my money and quit my job, the next day happened. And then I'm like, okay, well now what? And, for a while, for sure, you like try to live the dream. You like go on vacation, you work out, you do yoga during the day, whatever. But even that gets boring. And you find yourself at a dinner party and someone's like, so what do you do? And I'll be like, oh, nothing. like, are you going to plan? I'm like, yeah, I guess. You can't really, saying you're retired when you're in your 30s or 40s makes you sound like saying you're unemployed just makes you sound sad, and I didn't really want, that kind of went on for a while. And I really didn't want my story to be, I had early success in my 30s and then was a piece of for 30 years. And so, I'd say the misconception is like, there's this finish line and happiness is waiting for you and all your problems will be solved and you don't need anything to do after that. I think that your life is a journey and the FI is really financially convenient. You can go to the grocery store and not worry about national brands, and you can give the middle finger to your boss if you want, but you still need to live your life and you still need to decide what you're about and prepare for that existential question of what are you, like, what's your story now that you're retired? Are you just going to be unemployed for the rest of your life, or are you going to do something?
All right, Jeremy, my last question for you, and then I'll let you get back to your day job.
Oh, no.
What advice would you give to someone who wants to pursue financial independence?
That's a good question. I mean, I guess I have to always fall back on my 2 rules of building wealth, which are rule number 1 is to live below your means. And, we talk about we're 2 wealthy people, but we're frugal, right? And I think there is this misconception that once you're rich, it's all like sports cars and, fancy jewelry and making it rain. I think you just need to live below your means. Like, I did it when I was poor. I'm doing it when I'm rich. I think that is like a really key component. And other rich people do it too. Like the actual rich people I know, they're all really frugal. They splurge on things they like here and there, but they're not just like wasting money, right? And then rule number 2 is invest early and often. With that money that you're not spending, invest it over time. And, that's kind of the simplicity of the whole thing. It's one of those things that's not easy, just like fitness, like, eat well and exercise. It's very simple, but doesn't make it easy to do every day. Same for financial independence. It's like spend less than you make, invest the difference. The more you do that, the longer you do that, the more extreme nature in which you do that, the quicker you're going to get where you're going.
We just spoke with Cody Berman, and his advice was very, very similar as most people's is. But he's like, make a list of the things that you like, that really bring you value. And then things that aren't on that list, don't spend money on. And one of the things that isn't valuable to him on his list is a new car. I think you mentioned sports car as well. You're not even going to fit in one, so don't even bother.
That's true.
They're made for my size people. But I don't want one either. I had one for a while. It was fun to drive, but then I was like, there's a lot of money sitting on these 4 wheels that gives me the heebie-jeebies every time I drive this. So I sold it and bought a house instead. No kidding. And then like that was an itch that I scratched. And if you really want to have a great car, then that's on your list of things that really bring you joy. There are people who do, and great for them. But then there are other things that might be on your list that aren't on their list. But knowing what brings you joy is so helpful in staying on this path. Jeremy, thank you so much for your time today. It is always a great time talking to you. Can you tell our listeners where they can find you?
Thanks, Mindy. Thanks for having me. Yeah, all my financial literacy stuff is at personalfinanceclub.com or on social media at Personal Finance Club. And I did mention I'm an entrepreneur. I'm starting a new company called Nectarine, which is a way to find an advice-only, hourly, flat fee financial advisor who isn't going to sell you products, manage your money, anything like that. It's the way that I think you should find financial advice, and it's at hellonectarine.com.
I absolutely agree with you. That is the way to find financial advisors, because then they are working on your best interest and not on their own pocketbook's best interest. So, Jeremy, thank you so much for your time today. I really love talking to you. And if you, my dear viewers, will like this video, please click the thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel so you can hear more inspiring fire stories just like Jeremy's. All right, this is Mindy Jensen signing off.